Taunite story is about a species that doesn't fear being too weak in war. It fears being too good at it. You're used to stories where the danger is losing territory, losing the fight. But imagine a civilization that has the opposite problem. Every time it really commits to war, it wins fast, scales up faster, and then spends centuries trying to live with what that victory turned it into. So tonight, instead of replaying your day, you and I are going to wander into a quiet space station called Lyre Spire, where the light never changes, and a galactic council has a very human problem. Their borders are getting unstable. Their borders are getting unstable. And the one species that could scare everyone straight keeps saying, no, get comfortable however you are, because we're about to sit beside a historian named Ilyth Mora, watching as they're asked to solve a puzzle you can't fix with more ships or bigger guns. The council thinks humans are soft. Ilyth is sure they're hiding something. And as reports and old war graphs start to surface, a colder truth appears. Humans aren't refusing because they've forgotten how to fight. They're refusing because they remember in detail what happens when they win. On most nights, Lyre Spire felt like a quiet promise that many minds could live side by side without fear. Light never changed there. It stayed soft and even, like late afternoon on an Earth City street, right before sunset, when the day is calm, and people move a little slower. The air stayed at a gentle middle point. Not too dry, not too hot, not too cold. The sounds were low and steady, only soft hums from life support and distant movement. No species could claim that the station felt like their home, but no species could say that it felt like an attack either. In that steady place, the Council of Harmonized Systems tried to hold a galaxy together with meetings, promises, models, and signed agreements. It was careful work. It needed many minds and many types of bodies. It needed calm. On the night that mattered, the calm stayed the same, but the questions underneath it changed. Some borders in the outer arm had grown more tense. Some factions had started to test patrol lines and shared bases. Fear had begun to rise, the slow, tight kind of fear that did not shout but did not go away. Inside that worry, another idea started to grow. If humans were so good at war, why not ask them to stand closer to the edges? Why not ask them to use their old talent for fast force as a warning to others? From the outside, it sounded simple. From the inside, it was not. My name is Ilyth Mora, historian for the Council. I was asked to find out why humans kept saying no. At first, I thought I knew the answer. I thought they were acting kind to hide their real goals, or acting weak to gain protection. I thought the peaceful words in their messages were just a mask for fear or pride. By the time my work was done, I understood that I had been wrong in ways I had not even known were possible. Humans were not hiding their weakness. They were holding back their strength. They were holding back their strength. The light on Lyre Spire did not change when the council met in full session. It did not grow brighter for anger or dimmer for doubt. It stayed level, as if it refused to take sides. I sat in the upper ring of the main chamber and watched members arrive. That did not mean everyone was calm inside. The Aquan floated in their clear spheres, long bodies folded like slow rivers, circling inside their mobile homes. They liked cooler air and higher humidity, so the chamber misted, a fine film across the inner dome for them. The Kelsari moved on jointed legs, armor plates shifting softly as they crossed to their platform. Their bodies preferred thin, dry air, so the ring around them slowly vented away extra moisture. Far on the other side, the Threks settled into their cushioned pits, thick fur flattened by hidden fans that kept them from overheating. The chamber systems adjusted in small local zones, never all at once, never in ways that made sharp changes. For many years, the Council had used sudden changes in light, heat, or sound as warnings or threats. On Lyre Spire, there were no such tricks. The station's design told every visitor the same thing. No one would be allowed to gain advantage simply by how the air felt. I took my place at the observer's ring, tablet in hand, eyes on the central floor. The agenda icon pulsed softly in the air above the table, linking itself to every private surface in the room. Topics scrolled past my vision: border pressure in the outer spinward arm. Piracy increases along an old trade lane. Food supply volatility near a binary star system. And there, in clear text that did not match the calm light at all, use of human strategic presence as deterrence. The line sat between two more routine items, as if it was just another thought about trade or standards. My inner heat organs tightened slightly. This was not routine. Not for me. Not for humans. Not for anyone who had studied the last 6 centuries. Counselor Heshvar of the Kelsari took the speaking platform. Hesh moved with slow, careful steps, as if weighing each part of the floor. The Kelsari outer shell looks smooth to most species, but I had spent enough time with them to see the small color shifts across their armor plates. Today, the tones along Hesh's chest plates held a focused pattern, determined, certain. Honored Council, Heshed, voice translated into the shared channel at once. We meet again while the outer borders shake. Translation always removed small details of sound, but it kept enough. I could hear the push under Hesh's calm words. Data graphs appeared above the central table, trade lanes narrowed by hostile patrols, energy stations forced to add more defense drones, small colony worlds that now marked nearby regions in angry red. We have invested in treaties, in joint patrols, in shared law, Hesh went on. These have held in most regions, for most cycles. But there are limits to what codes can do alone. Some counselors nodded. Some remained still. The Aquan spheres drifted closer together, their bodies coiling in ways that meant worry. The Threks representatives sat heavy and motionless, eyes half closed, but their internal sensors took in every line of data. In the outer arm, Hesh said, "Certain factions believe that the Council is soft. They believe we have lost the will for clear response. They push, they test, they wait to see if we will act." The next graph appeared. It showed numbers beside a familiar name. Earth, soul, human union. Yet, Hesh said, we host, within this council, a civilization with a long record of fast, effective mobilization. Humans have done what few other species have managed. When pressed, they do not collapse. They scale. They grow their systems with speed. They turn threat into a machine for action. And for several centuries now, they have chosen not to use that machine beyond emergencies inside their own sphere. Hesh paused, then added, they could help steady our borders. They could stand at the edge and give shape to deterrence, but they decline such roles. Again and again. The chamber quiet deepened. Even the hum of the air systems seemed to step back. We must ask why, Hesh said. Are they hiding weakness behind careful language? Do they wish to hold their strength in reserve for their own plans? Or do they simply not care about the wider arm enough to take risk? Hesh turned slightly, headplates tilting toward the human delegation. They tell us it is about risk management, but their documents read. Soft words, gentle words, while real danger grows. A soft shift passed through the chamber. The human delegation sat together on a raised platform near the second tier. They wore simple suits, marked only by small flags and the fixed circle symbol of their risk office. At the center of the group sat Dr. Mara Chen, face thoughtful, hands still. She did not move to answer. The agenda had reserved that for later. Hesh continued. The council requires clarity. We cannot organize our defense if we do not understand what stands behind human restraint. Therefore, I propose the appointment of an independent historian from our own council, ranks to review all human war refusal records, and present an honest report on their causes and likely future patterns. My throat tightened. I knew what came next before I saw my own name. Historian Ilyth Mora, Hesh said, your long work on pre-council conflicts has given you a sharp eye for patterns. You have shown that you can read behind nationalist myths and heroic stories. You have also, I must note, shown care for human achievements in non-military domains. This makes you, in my view, a balanced choice. I nominate you as lead investigator. All eyes shifted toward me. Some faces showed interest, some doubt. The Aquan representative lifted two thin, feeding limbs in a polite sign of support. The Threx leader's fur plates shifted a small degree, which for their species meant agreement. The human delegation remained calm, but my tablet flashed with a brief note from the council secretariat. Preliminary acceptance pending vote. Colored bands of light formed above each delegation, shifting to green for yes, amber for question, blue for no. As always, humans sent in their vote last, after a short pause. Green. The motion passed. My name moved from the general text to the primary line of the session record. Appointment confirmed. I stood, bowed in the shared style, and sat again, my internal sense of balance adjusting to a new path I had not asked for but could not refuse. Historian appointments from the full council carried weight. They were not just academic tasks. They shaped policy. They shaped what children would learn in 100-star systems. After the session, As members left the chamber in quiet groups, a courier drone glided to my seat and dropped a secure capsule. I pressed my identity plate against the surface. The capsule opened, and my display filled with titles. Human Union, DCL requests for Council Border Enforcement support. There were hundreds of items. Each line marked a year, a sector, a type of incident, a council request, and a human reply. I chose a random entry near the top. Border year 631. Sector Outer Spinward 14C. Request human strategic deterrent. Presence at flashpoint nodes. Reason given for decline. Incompatibility with human risk standards for conflict scaling. I opened the full document. On the surface, the language sounded polite and mild. The letter thanked the Council for its trust in human capacity. It expressed deep care for shared peace. It stressed solidarity and the hope for nonviolent solutions. Anyone who stopped at that first layer might think humans were simply trying to sound kind. But linked below the gentle words sat the full technical review. A dense, detailed war risk report. Graphs showed past human conflicts and the rate at which small actions had turned into large movements. Tables mapped how quickly new weapons had spread during times of fear. Notes pointed to old human centuries, when war had become not just an action, but a system that fed on itself. Under a heading marked Scaling Risk, the report listed danger levels in clear, simple numbers. It spoke of how quickly human logistics could adapt under pressure, how easily they could shift production lines, information systems, and social stories to support conflict. They were not afraid of weakness. They were afraid of their own strength when it ran too fast. Each paragraph of bright, peaceful explanation sat directly above a dark, very cool block of risk analysis that felt more like a structural check on a fusion plant than like a moral speech. I read until my eyes ached. The pattern held. Kind words on top. Hard numbers below. Not a single report said, "We are better than war." They said, in many different ways, we are too good at it. I felt something inside me move. It was not trust yet. It was not agreement. It was attention. The humans were not hiding their thought process, but they were not pushing it in front either. They had buried it under a blanket of safe talk, as if they knew that most people would never read past that layer. The next day, I received a formal meeting request from the human delegation. Dr. Mara Chen wished to speak with me. I met Dr. Mara Chen in a room built for hard talks that needed soft edges. Lyre Spire had many such spaces. This one sat near the center of the station. Far from any viewports, the walls were a smooth, quiet gray that did not reflect much light. The furniture adjusted shape and height as soon as we entered, taking cues from both our bodies. The room smelled faintly of clean air and nothing else. Mara Chen arrived with a small bag, a data band at her wrist, and a face that carried years of sleep, cut short and then slowly repaid. She moved with the care of someone used to working around delicate systems. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple band, not as a fashion choice, but to keep it from falling into her eyes. Ilyth Mora, she said, offering her hand in the human style. Thank you for meeting on short notice. Thank you for inviting me, I said, and took her hand. Human skin felt thin and warm, with a slight give over the bones. Their hands always reminded me of tool grips. She sat, and the chair rose slightly to support her knees. The air around her cooled. A small amount. My own seat adjusted in the other direction. I read the council vote, she said. You have been given a useful job. Also, a dangerous one in political terms. Knowledge can be dangerous, I said. But so can ignorance. Mara smiled with the corner of her mouth. Spoken like a historian. I speak more like an engineer. For me, danger is not a symbol. It is a set of numbers. You are a risk officer, I said. You study war, I study how things fail. She said, war is one of the ways complex systems fail in predictable and very harmful patterns. She opened her bag and took out a thin tablet. It was human-made but adapted for council use, so its surface shifted into glyphs I could read. You saw the soft layer and the hard layer below it. Yes, I said. The upper language sounds like peace. The lower language sounds like engineering. That is fair, she said. It is also not an accident. Many on the council think you avoid war because you are gentle now, I said. Others think you are weak and do not want to admit it. Heshvar thinks you are proud and wish to keep your strength as a secret tool. I am supposed to find the truth. Good, Mara said. Then let us start with the simplest line we have. Humans do not avoid war because we are peaceful. We avoid war because we know how measurable we are. The phrase felt strange in my ears. Measurable? Yes, she said. Predictable in certain domains. When some conditions are present, you can expect certain curves to show up. We saw it again and again on Earth before we reached the stars. She tapped the tablet. A graph rose in the air between us, hovering at chest height. The horizontal line marked time. The vertical line marked scale of mobilization. Several curves appeared, each a different color, each rising in similar shapes. These are major human wars from our industrial and early digital ages, she said. Different centuries, different causes, different technologies. But once the war system formed, certain things happened in similar ways. She pointed at the first curve, production ramp. Once we committed, factory output rose on a predictable curve. Pugix, Wajana, we turned every process toward the goal. Civilian goods became military goods. The faster we built the system, the faster it demanded more from us. She pointed at another curve. Information control. Once we accepted certain threats, we allowed limits on freedom of speech, on press, on dissent. We accepted surveillance we would reject in peace. We told ourselves it was temporary. But it changed us for years beyond the war. She pointed again. Technology change. Under war pressure, we removed brakes from research. We allowed risks we would never allow during calm years. We got fast progress, rockets, computation, nuclear energy. But we also got new ways to kill at distance, new ways to break trust, new ways to shape minds. Her hand paused, the pattern repeated. Not exactly, but close enough that we could model it later. So you fear war because you always become the same shape? I asked. We fear war because when we stop measuring, we become something we do not like, she said. We become very good at whatever works. We become willing to change our laws, our morals, our sense of self to win. And here is the part that matters most. We win often enough that it feels justified, and that makes it hard to go back. Many species learn to fight better, then later choose peace. What makes you different? Scale and speed, she said. Our brains and our tools grew together. When we learned to make machines that could copy themselves, and systems that could spread ideas in hours, our old war patterns found new fuel. If we let those patterns run now, with late 27th century systems, the curve would go very high, very fast. She changed the display. New graphs appeared, this time with dotted lines marking possible futures. She said, they are scenario ranges. When we model what happens if humans run a full war mobilization across our current networks and industry, with council-level technology, we get risk profiles that are not acceptable. Not acceptable for you, I said, or not acceptable for the council. Both, she answered. We could probably win a lot of fights the council is worried about. That is the problem. She let that hang there, the way engineers sometimes let a number hang. Not dramatic, just heavy. On Earth, she went on, we had centuries where we thought the test of greatness was whether we could win wars. If we passed that test, we told ourselves that history would remember us kindly. Later, we learned to ask a different question. What question? What does passing the test turn us into? She said, if we win by becoming less able to see our own damage, is that really a win? She tapped the tablet again. New images appeared. Old city ruins, burned forests, charts of climate damage linked to war production, records of societies that had never quite recovered their former trust or equity after long conflicts. After a few late disasters, she said softly, some of our better risk minds started to treat war, not as glory, but as a dangerous chemical, useful in tiny amounts, to stop worse things, but always at risk of spreading. So they asked, how do we keep this chemical in a sealed container? How do we build layers of glass and rules around it? This is your containment idea, I said. Exactly, Mara said. So we built layers. Legal breaks, like our constitutions and international laws. So we built layers, oversight bodies that stayed awake even when people were tired of thinking about risk. Red categories that forced us to slow down when things felt hot. Training that taught commanders to pause, not rush, when their hearts raced. You talk about these things as if they were machines, I said, but they are laws and habits. For humans, Laws and habits are also machines, she said. They are machines made of minds. They can fail. They can break. They can be turned toward harm if we let them run without review. So we treat them like we treat reactors or jump drives. We test them. We add backup. We set limit switches. She brought up another set of images, old photos and models of places she named slowly for me. This, she said, is Pasadena. During our 20th and 21st centuries, it was a center for space and systems engineering. People there learned to ask, over and over, what can go wrong, and how will we catch it? Later, those habits spread into war planning and law. The next image showed monuments and long gray buildings near a river. This is Washington, D.C. Many of our major laws and military decisions passed through here. After some of our worst mistakes, people here helped design stronger oversight and clearer limits on emergency powers. Another set of buildings rose from a desert plain with mountains in the distance. This is El Paso, a border city. There, and in places like it, we learned hard lessons about escalation, about how fast fear can turn into violence, and how much training it takes to slow that moment down. They're all very different places. I said. Yes, she said, but from them, and from many others, we built a culture of breaks. A culture where the proud thing is not how fast you can act when angry, but how well you can measure yourself when you feel that first surge. And this is why you will not be our club, I said. She nodded. If we take on the role the Council wants, as the sharp edge at your borders, we know what will happen. At first, we will accept limits. We will say, we are only there to deter. But over time, people will push us to act a little faster, to solve a few more problems with force. Each success will become a reason to keep going. Our own people will start to believe that we are great again because we can fix things by threat. She looked up at the graphs, now dim behind her head. We have seen that story already. We do not like how it ends, but without you at the border, I said, thinking of Hayshvar's graphs. Others may pay the cost of your restraint. Yes, she said quietly. That is the hardest part. We know that saying no to certain roles may cause short-term harm. We know people will accuse us of selfishness, but we also know that if we say yes in the wrong way, we may cause much greater harm later in many more places. When our systems are running hot and no one can stop them easily. She leaned back. So we have rules, binding rules. We do not deploy large-scale human war systems outside our home region, except under very narrow conditions. We do not place our forces where our own population can be stirred into constant fear. We do not design standing structures whose main purpose is to threaten others. And when we do have to act, we design our missions with breaks built in from the start. I thought of the reports again, of the phrases built in, pauses, and mandatory outside review. At the time, they had seemed like strange add-ons to military plans. Now they looked more like supports in a building that had to stand through a long storm. Hayshvar and others think your restraint is performance. I said. They say you talk about peace to feel better about yourselves, or to hide that your power is waning. Mara's eyes did not harden. They stayed the same clear brown. If our power was waning, it would actually be safer to use it more, she said. The worst case is when strong powers use war often and well. That is when systems scale. That is when people say, it works, so it must also be right. The cost of winning too easily. I said, feeling the phrase settle in me. Exactly, she said. Losing a war hurts. Winning the wrong way can change you forever. She turned the tablet toward me. A final graph showed human war activity over several centuries. The line rose sharply during old periods of global conflict, then dropped over time. Between the spikes, the line never hit zero, but it stayed low and controlled. Small interventions, strict oversight, long periods of refusal. We are not saints, she said. We still fight sometimes. We still make mistakes. But we try to keep our war system small and boxed. We treat each use like a hazardous material release. We document, we investigate, we apologize when we fail. Not because we enjoy shame, but because the habit of review keeps us measurable to ourselves. And now the council wants you to open the box wider, I said. Yes, she answered. They want to stand us at the border like a loaded weapon on a table, hoping the sight of us will make everyone more polite. They do not understand that the sight of us standing there would also change us. It would change what our children think we are for. Silence held for a long moment. The room's air systems hummed on, slow and even. I am not here to tell you what to write, Mara said at last. You will see what you see. You will also see our failures. We have records of those too. But I ask this, please do not let the council believe that our restraint is a simple mood or a passing fashion. It is an engineered response to data. It is a risk system built from centuries of harm. She paused, then added, if they want us to stand closer to their borders, they should first learn how we built our internal brakes. They should copy our oversight and our red categories. Otherwise, they will just be asking us to break our own container and pour the contents into their problems. I will need more than graphs, I said. I will need to see how this works when you are tested. You will, she said, sooner than you or I would like. There are people on this station right now who are not happy with our answer. They may try to create a situation that proves us wrong or proves us useful. Her calm expression did not change, but I saw the small tightness at the edges of her eyes. We have prepared for that risk too, she said. If they test us, we will show you what a red category looks like from the inside. I left the meeting with a copy of her data and a strange new weight in my chest. I had come to Lyre Spire that cycle ready to uncover a lie or a secret plan. Instead, I had found something harder to fit into simple stories. Humans were not pretending to be better than they were. They were afraid of something inside themselves, and they had turned that fear into laws, habits, and numbers. I did not yet know that others on the station were already setting up the test Mara had warned about near a thin, bright line of space that carried people and aid between fragile worlds. Soon the calm of Lyre Spire would be measured against the sharp, controlled silence of humans in red category mode, and I would stand close enough to see how a species holds itself back on purpose. The first signs of the test did not look like war. They looked like small changes in a data feed. I was in my study ring, looking over another set of old human reports, when a set of alerts slid quietly across the top of my tablet. The icons were small and gray, which meant they had not yet reached full council alarm. They carried labels for border incident, corridor disruption, and request for escort review. I tapped the first one. A map unfolded in front of me, showing the outer arm near a zone marked as a humanitarian corridor. It was a long, thin region where ships carrying food, medicine, and evacuated civilians could pass through areas of tension under shared protection rules. The Council had written those rules with great care. Attacks on corridor traffic were treated as grave acts. A short report sat beneath the map. A convoy under mixed Council escort, including one human Union patrol ship, had been stopped and delayed by an armed faction near a disputed station. No one had been killed. No cargo had been taken. No ships had been destroyed. On paper, it was a minor incident, but the language in the margins felt wrong. The armed faction had not simply stopped the convoy to check documents. They had insisted on making the human ship hold position, while smaller, weaker escorts were ordered to perform pointless maneuvers. They had forced the human officers to send formal requests for permission to move, but then ignored those requests for long stretches of time. They had demanded that the human ship shut down certain visible systems as a sign of goodwill while they watched. It was not the damage that mattered. It was the shape of the humiliation. I checked the escort roster. The human ship had only a small crew on board, supported by drones. Its main job was risk assessment and emergency aid, not heavy combat. It had been added to the convoy at the last moment, after some border worlds had asked for the calming presence of human discipline. I checked the author of that suggestion. The record showed that the idea had been pushed by a small group of counselors and advisors, including Heshvar. I felt my inner heat run colder. Soon after, a new notice appeared. The human ship's commander had filed a formal incident report and had marked it with a label I had not seen attached to anything so small before. Red category. Preliminary. I left my study and made my way to the human delegation sector. Lyre Spire's corridors felt the same as always, but I knew now that the station's calm surface could sit above many kinds of strain. The entrance to the human sector had always been quiet, with only a small change in wall color and two simple guards at the door. Today, there were more people inside, moving with fast, contained focus. No one ran. No one shouted. But there was a tightness in the air. A human assistant met me near the inner ring. Doctor, Chen and Commander Navarro are expecting you, she said. Please follow me. We passed a screen showing a live map of the corridor. The convoy ships were clustered together in a safe holding formation near a small neutral station. The armed faction ships had taken up position slightly ahead, like a group of predators sitting just out of reach, showing their teeth but not biting. Mara Chen standing beside a taller human in low-grade uniform, with a dark beard and sharp, steady eyes. He looked like someone who had once stayed awake through long nights and had not forgotten how. Ilyth Mora said, "Thank you for coming quickly. This is Commander Eli Navarro, in charge of our corridor mission assets." Navarro nodded to me, then turned back to the map. His voice, when he spoke, carried a kind of flat control that I had begun to recognize in human officers who knew they were walking near the edge of something dangerous. "You have been told what we are facing?" he asked. "I have read the incident summary," I said. "It looks like a test." "It is," he said. "They have chosen a place where they think we cannot respond without looking like bullies. They have chosen an insult that does not quite rise to the level of open attack." "A quiet humiliation," Mara added, "just enough to make our crews angry. Just enough to see if we will react fast and hard." "Will you?" I asked. Mara looked at Navarro, and he answered. "Not fast," he said. "Not hard beyond what is needed, but not soft either. We are moving this to full red category." He touched the map, and the display shifted. New lines appeared marking zones around the convoy and the armed ships. Other symbols showed council observers, mediator vessels, and distant patrols. "When we declare red category," Mara said, "several things happen at once. First, we slow our own decision path. No major action can be taken without passing through extra checks. Second, we add outside eyes. Independent observers are brought into our planning, even if that reveals methods we would rather keep private. Third, we harden our rules of engagement so that our own people cannot escalate out of anger." "You add breaks while being provoked?" I asked. "Does that not risk losing the moment?" Navarro gave a thin, humorless smile. "We have lost more from moving too fast than from moving too slow," he said. "If this was a rescue where lives were being killed during every delay, we would design a different red category. Here, the main danger is escalation. Our last war systems scaled from small tests like this." He pointed at a small icon near the convoy. "That is our escort ship. It is not a carrier. It is not a dreadnought. It is a risk platform with some teeth. Our job now is to solve this problem in a way that protects the convoy, protects the corridor rules, and does not feed the story that humans will answer every insult with overwhelming force." "And if the armed faction tries to push harder?" I asked. "Then we use the teeth," Navarro said simply, "but only inside a fence." He brought up another display. It was a set of written rules, simple and clear, each marked with checkboxes and sign-off lines. "These are our mission rules of engagement," he said. "Normally, I would draft them with my own staff and have them approved by human command only. Because this is red category and linked to a political test, we are adding more." He highlighted several lines that had been added in a different color. "Independent council observers must ride on our ships during any operation beyond escort," he read. Full sensor records must be made available to Council oversight within one cycle of mission closure. Any change in fire authorization must pass through a delay of no less than 3 standard minutes, unless civilian lives are in direct current danger. I blinked. You are building pauses into your ability to fire, yes, Navarro said. 3 minutes is a very long time in combat, but a very short time in politics. It is enough to catch yourself before you do something out of anger or pride instead of out of clear need. He scrolled further. We also have destruction limits. We will not target life support on enemy ships unless they are actively firing on the convoy. We will not hit stations holding civilians. We will not break the corridor itself. We will not use any weapons that can spread damage beyond the immediate scene. It sounds like you are tying your own hands, I said. Mora shook her head. We are tying our old reflexes, the ones that say, overwhelm them, and the problem goes away. We know that is not true. The problem only changes shape. A small light blinked on the wall. The human assistant stepped in. Doctor. Chen Commander Navarro, Council Lyre Spire has sent a message, she said. They request a copy of your mission plan and ask if human forces require any additional authority to act decisively. Mara's eyes narrowed a little. Of course they do, she said. Thank them for their concern. Tell them we are implementing standard red category procedures and will keep them fully informed within clear bounds. The assistant left. Navarro looked at Mara. He is pushing us to either overreact or look weak, he said. If we go soft, he will say we are unreliable. If we hit too hard, he will say we are useful and ask for more of the same. Yes, Mara said. That is why Ilyth needs to be here. History needs to see the shape of this test, not just the outcome. Navarro turned back to me. We are expanding our briefing room, he said. You will sit with us as an observer. You will see the full risk protocol. In return, you must accept our data handling rules. No live transmission of details during the operation. Full freedom to report after review. I agree, I said at once. My task is not served by only reading your polished reports. I need to see how your systems look when they are running. The mission plan came together over the next few hours. Humans called more staff into the room. Some wore military gray. Others civilian blue with the risk office symbol. A few carried the heavier clothing of people who would board ships soon. Mara led the risk section. Navarro led operations. Each time someone suggested a direct, simple attack, Mara would raise a hand and ask for failure modes. If we disable their engines, a young officer asked, what if their ship drifts into the corridor lane and blocks it for months? Mara countered. What if debris hits civilian platforms? What if their children die of cold on a damaged ship, and their people spend the next 50 years telling that story? If we send a warning shot close to their hull, another said. What if their nervous gunners panic and fire at a convoy ship by mistake? Mara asked, what if their commander has orders to answer any shot with full fire, no matter the context? Slowly, the plan shifted away from grand moves and into smaller, more exact steps. We will start with law, Navarro said at last. We will inform them that their actions break corridor rules and that we have moved the incident into a level that triggers automatic council review. We will give them a clear way out. We will also let them know that every ship in their group is now under high-resolution sensor watch. That will not make them stop, I said. No, he agreed. But it will give any cautious minds among them something to hold on to when hotheads push for more. And if they keep pushing? I asked. Then we shift to selective disarmament, he said. We have tools that can disable specific weapon systems without breaking the whole ship. We use those first. We show control. We do not go for the throat. And if they finally open fire on the convoy? I asked, hearing my voice turn slightly dry. Then we protect the convoy, Navarro said, with full speed. But even then, we will keep to our fences. The operation began 8 hours later. I watched from the human sector's secure viewing room, surrounded by Mora, Navarro, and a set of calm, focused operators whose hands moved across controls with frightening ease. The image on the main wall showed the corridor in real time, processed through multiple sensors. The convoy ships formed a tight cluster, their engines pulsing low. The armed faction's ships sat in a loose half-ring. Ahead, human communications went out first. In clear neutral language, Navarro's voice, carried by a relay drone, called the armed commanders by name and number. He cited the corridor treaty sections they were currently breaking. He listed possible penalties. He also offered a face-saving exit, a timed withdrawal in exchange for no formal naming in the first council notices. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the armed ships replied. Their commanders spoke with a rough laugh in the background. They mocked the human escort for having shut down systems earlier on Danand. They suggested that humans were hiding behind old stories. They said they would allow the convoy to pass only after each ship broadcast a statement of thanks to their faction. Along the back of the room, a few human officers shifted slightly, as if fighting the urge to clench their fists. Mara's eyes flicked to a screen showing crew stress levels. Red rising on 3 stations. She said softly, "Remind them of breathing drills." Messages went out to the crews. Short, practical lines. Focus on task. Slow breath. Check controls twice. Navarro stayed still. "Response," he said to the comtech. This time, his voice carried a harder edge. He repeated the law sections, slower, leaving no room for confusion. He pointed out that the convoy carried refugees and food bound for neutral worlds. He stated that the demand for public praise broke corridor neutrality. He then made the shift. Under Council recognized human union protocols. He said this incident has been declared red category. All human actions are now under direct oversight. If you continue to block the convoy, we will apply limited controlled force to remove your ability to attack. We will not aim to destroy you. We will not fire on your life support unless you fire first on us or the convoy. But we will not let you keep this position. In the viewing room, a timer started at the corner of the wall. 3 minutes. The built-in pause. "That is your first warning," Navarro said. "You have 3 standard minutes to begin pulling back to a legal distance. The timer ticked down. 90 seconds passed. The armed ships did nothing. Someone in their background laughed over the open channel. At 60 seconds, a small ship near the edge of their group began to drift backward. A nervous captain, perhaps. Their commander shouted at them to hold position. At 0, Navarro gave a tiny nod. Phase 2, he said. Outside, small human drones peeled away from the escort ship, invisible to normal sensors, but marked clearly on our. They slid through the gaps between ships and came to rest near specific emitters and gun ports. On the armed vessels, we could burn these off, a weapons tech said, almost to themselves. Be done in 10 seconds. We will not, Mara replied. Strike plans stand as written. At Navarro's signal, the drones pulsed directed energy in tight, narrow beams. No bright flares. No dramatic explosions. On the sensors, I saw weapon after weapon go dark on the armed ships. Targeting arrays fused, missile bays sealed shut. Within seconds, the balance of threat had changed. The armed faction still had engines and life support. They still had some smaller defenses, but they no longer had the heavy guns that had made them so bold. That should be enough for them to choose pride. Or sense, Navarro said. It was not quite enough. 2 of the armed ships, angered by the targeted strikes, turned their remaining weapons toward the convoy and fired wild shots. One beam grazed a cargo ship's shield, another flashed past a medical bay, missing by a distance that felt too small for comfort. The room did not tense, it hardened. Navarro's hand moved to the fire authorization control. A small light beside the button glowed red. Another timer started. 3 minutes, the second pause. Under red category, Mara said, more to me than to the crew. Even now, we give ourselves a last window to reconsider full response. 3 minutes in which others can suggest lower paths. The first minute passed in a flurry of analysis. Could the armed ships still fire again? Had their shots been accidents from failing systems? Could the convoy shift slightly to a safer angle without any attack at all? The second minute passed in silence. The armed commander shouted threats over the channel, voice shrill now that their heavy weapons were gone. They promised allies, revenge, long memory. In the third minute, one of the human junior officers spoke up. Commander, she said, if we destroy those 2 ships now, we will save the convoy today. But we may lose other corridors later. Their people will only tell the story of us killing them for embarrassment. Navarro did not take his eyes off the screen. Alternative? He asked. Disable their drives and towing rigs only, she said. Leave them adrift but safe. Let council patrols pick them up for arrest. They will still hate us, but they will be alive to face law instead of becoming martyrs. Navarro's jaw tightened. He looked at Mara. Her look said nothing, but her shoulders seemed to loosen a fraction. A just plan, Navarro said. Guns only to mobility, no core strikes, no hull breaches. The red light beside the fire control shifted to amber. Authorization changed shape, not direction. Outside, The escort ship fired at last. The shots were precise and plain. They were not meant to impress. Energy beams cut neatly through engine pylons and towing struts on the two most aggressive armed ships. Their drives went dark. Their frames shook, but their hulls stayed sealed. Their lights stayed on. Their life support stayed active. Within minutes, the armed ships could no longer hold their blocking positions. The convoy began to move past them, slow but steady, with the human escort ship leading, and several council observers watching closely, their own recorders running. The armed commander screamed. Over the wide channel, he called humans cowards and monsters. In the same breath, he promised that his people would never forget. This day, Navarro's response was short. Record everything he told his crew. We want full, clear logs for council, and for any court that hears this later. He sent one last message to the disabled ships. It included coordinates for a rescue tug under neutral control and a copy of the law sections they had broken. It also included a statement that the human ship had not touched their life support. We want that fact on their record. Mara said quietly, we want their children to have at least the option to see that we stop short of what we could have done. When the convoy cleared the danger zone and reached a safer point near a friendly station, the room clapped. The humans simply started shutting things down. Begin dismantling, Navarro ordered. Weapons systems powered down. Drones were recalled and placed into sealed storage. Temporary command links to civilian networks were cut. Extra intelligence taps were closed and logged. I watched as they took apart their war machine as carefully as they had built it. This is standard? I asked Mara. In red category. Yes, she said. We treat the end of an operation like the end of a chemical burn. We do not leave the reaction running. We do not tell ourselves that since we already have the tools hot, we might as well use them a little longer. Reports started printing into the system. Automatic ones came first. Movement logs, energy use, damage reports. Mara began a separate file marked After Action Review. She invited me to sit beside her as she wrote. We record not just what we did, she said, but what we almost did, the options we rejected, and why. The angry thoughts we had, the ways the test pulled at our old habits. You are not afraid to write those down? I asked. We are very afraid, she said. That is why we must write them down. If we pretend we did not feel the pull, we will not be ready next time. Navarro came over. His face looked heavier now that the immediate pressure was gone. We kept our fences, he said, more to himself than to us. But we still fired on people who, until today, had never been touched by human guns. How do you feel? Mara asked him, typing his answer as she did. Unsteady, he said. Angry at them. Also angry at us. Also relieved. Also worried about what this will do to council demands. Also relieved. Also worried about what this will do to council demands. Defay's paid to come so. and Sigma. He looked at me. "You will write about this," he said. "How will it look in your history?" "I do not know yet," I said, "but I know what I saw. You chose to slow yourselves down in the middle of insult and danger. You invited outside eyes in. You stopped short of the easiest victory. Do not forget that." "I will not," I said. "But I will also not forget how quickly you began to take that force apart. Once the immediate need was gone." Hours later, the council called an emergency session. The chamber on Lyre Spire felt the same as always, but the faces inside it did not. Heshvar stood before the assembly, graphs behind them showing the incident in bright lines and symbols. They spoke of armed aggression, of human skill, of decisive response with admirable control. They argued that this event showed how useful humans could be as a standing deterrent. See how quickly the hostile faction folded when faced with human precision. Hesh said, "See how the convoy passed safely. Imagine what such presence could mean if placed along all our troubled borders." When it was Mara's turn to speak, she did not bring many images. She showed only a few still frames, the convoy at risk, the armed ships half disabled but alive, the human escort powering down. After she spoke plainly, "We did not win because we are moral," she said. "We did not hold back because we are gentle. We did not slow ourselves down because we enjoy making our job harder." She looked slowly around the chamber. "We did those things," she said, "because history shows that when we stop measuring ourselves in war, we win too easily, and that changes us into something dangerous to everyone, including ourselves." A small ripple of confusion passed through some delegations. "Win too easily" was not a phrase many liked to hear. Mara tapped a control. A simple chart appeared. It was not full of details, only a set of tall bars and short bars. Human wars marked along a long timeline. "These tall bars," she said, "are periods when humans let war shape everything. We poured all our energy, our stories, our tools, and our pride into conflict. We won many of those wars. On paper, we passed the test, but look at what followed. After each tall bar, smaller bars marked climate damage, economic crashes, long-term trauma, law changes that took decades to undo. The lines were clear even to those who did not know human history well. During those periods, she continued, we told ourselves that the ability to win fast and hard proved our greatness. We were proud of how flexible and clever we were. We said, whatever works. As long as we survive, we scaled our war systems into every part of life. She turned off the chart. Later, when we had time to breathe, we saw the cost, she said. Not just the dead, not just the ruins. We saw that we had trained ourselves to accept control, fear, and suspicion as normal. We saw that we had made it easy for leaders to ask us to give up rights for safety, and very hard to get those rights back. She glanced briefly at Navarro. We learned that we are very good at justifying anything once we are afraid. That is why our risk officers treat war like a hazardous material. That is why we build red categories, oversight, and built-in pauses. She folded her hands. So when you ask us to stand at your borders as a constant threat, she said, we do not see an honor. We see a request that we step back toward those tall bars. We see a path that leads not just to victories, but to a slow change in what it means to be human. She took a breath. We will fight when we must. We will answer specific calls under strict limits. But we will not become your permanent club. Not because we are soft, but because we have felt what happens to us when we pass the test of war too easily. With that, she sat, silence held. It was not the empty silence of people who had not heard. It was the heavy kind that comes when ideas do not yet know where to land. The presiding chair turned toward me. Historian Ilyth Mora, they said, you have completed your investigation into human war refusal. The council requests your findings. I stood. My legs felt steady, but inside my chest, something moved quickly. A report in this chamber did not stay here. It would pass into training centers, archives, and speech banks across a wide arm of the galaxy. My report is in your systems, I said. You may read every section in full. Today, I will speak only to the heart of your question. I looked around. I saw Heshvar's focused, waiting gaze. I saw Mara's calm face. I saw many species with very different bodies, all listening for words about a kind of danger that did not fit neatly into charts of ships and guns. You asked me why humans avoid war. I said, you offered 3 main guesses: that they are playing at moral purity to gain influence, that they are weak and hiding it, or that they are proud and keeping their strength for themselves. I let those ideas hang in the air for a moment. From what I have seen, I said, none of those ideas is correct. Soft lights over several platforms shifted color. In surprise, humans do not avoid war because they are peaceful by nature, I said. Their own history shows that they are fully capable of long, intense, and creative violence. They do not avoid war because they lack power. Their performance at the corridor has reminded us that they can mobilize skill, technology, and control quickly when needed, and they do not avoid war as a clever trick to save their strength for some hidden plan. The structures they have built to slow themselves are far too costly and too public for that. I called up a simple image, not a battle, but a diagram of human risk systems, red categories. Oversight councils, legal breaks, training protocols. This is what sits under their soft words, I said. Not just hope, but machinery. They have turned fear of their own capacity into layers of restraint. They call for witnesses when they act. They design forced pauses into their decision paths. They design forced pauses into their decision. They tear down their war systems as soon as the limited job is done. I changed the image to a copy of one of their refusal letters to the council, with its bright, kind phrases at the top and hard numbers below. On the surface, I said, this looks like moral language, but read the linked reports, and you will see that their restraint comes from data. They have measured what happens to them when they relax their brakes. They know that they pass the test of war too often, and they fear what passing does to their laws, their minds, and their children. I turned toward Heshvar. Councillor Hesh has argued that human presence at our borders would reduce conflict, I said. Short term, this may be true. Their skill and reputation might make some factions think twice. But if we place them there as a permanent shield, we must understand what we are asking them to risk. I let my gaze travel back across the chamber. We would not simply be using a tool, I said. We would be slowly changing a species that has spent centuries learning to keep its own power on a leash. We would be pushing them away from the culture they have built around measured restraint and toward an older shape. One where war becomes not just something they do, but something they are. I called up one last image, a very simple line, rising fast and then falling, marked as war curve, and beside it a slower line, marked as self-respect. Humans have learned that for them, these lines can move apart, I said. They can keep their pride in saying no. They can choose to measure themselves by how tightly they hold their own strength, not by how quickly they use it. I drew in a slow breath. My conclusion is this, I said. Human restraint is not fear of enemies. It is fear of their own unmeasured ability to justify whatever works. They avoid war not because they cannot win, but because they know that winning too easily can break the systems that keep them humane. The word humane did not translate neatly across all species, but the shared net rendered it as able to see others as real. So what should the council do? I asked aloud, before anyone else could. First, I said, we should stop treating human refusal as an insult or a game. When they say no to permanent border roles, they are honoring a risk system built from hard lessons. We should respect that, even when it frustrates us. Second, I continued, if we admire the results of their restraint, we should copy the parts of it that can fit us, not their exact laws or symbols, but their habits of oversight, their red categories, their requirement that outside eyes watch inside their war rooms, their practice of building delays into the moments when anger and fear call for speed. I let the chamber absorb that. Instead of asking humans to break open their container and pour more of their war potential into our problems, I said, we should ask them to share their containment systems. Let them help us design our own brakes, our own ways to slow down in the heat of crisis. Third, I said, if we ever do invite human forces into shared defense beyond their home space, we must agree in advance to accept their risk standards. That means accepting their slowdowns, their observers, their dismantling of war tools once a mission ends. If we cannot accept those, we should not call them at all. I paused. There will be costs to this, I said. Without humans as a constant threat at the border, we may face more small tests and raids in the short term. We may have to work harder, together, to build up other forms of deterrence. We may have to give up the comfort of thinking that a single strong hand can solve our fear. I looked at Mara and Navarro. But if we push humans into a role that makes them forget their own fear of themselves, I said, the cost later could be far greater. Not because they would turn on us in some simple betrayal, but because their old war habits might wake and spread through systems far beyond any single border. And if that happens, not even they know how easily they could stop it. I let my hands fall to my sides. My recommendation, I said clearly, is that the Council should not build a permanent strategy around human war power. Instead, we should build a shared strategy around human-style restraint. We should ask them to be our teachers in containment, not our standing sword. I'd bowed in the shared style and returned to my seat. Debate followed, as it always did. Heshvar argued that my fears were too distant and that present dangers required firmer answers. Some border world leaders agreed with Hesh, their voices tight with worry for their people. Others, especially those who had lived through earlier large conflicts, spoke in support of my view. They had heard something in Mar's words that did not fit into simple talk of power. In the end, the Council did not give Hess all that he wanted. There would be no permanent human guard line drawn across the outer arm. Instead, a compromise formed. Humans would continue to answer specific calls under strict conditions. Stand. Red category rules would be written into shared protocols. A new joint office would be created where human risk officers would help other species design their own oversight and breaks. Council patrols would be strengthened by mixed teams trained in de-escalation and controlled response. It was not perfect. No decision in that chamber ever was. But it was a step that did not require humans to drop their leash. Some weeks later, my formal report filed and my role in the hearings done, I traveled to Earth. I had seen human systems in data and in action, but I wanted to see where their habits had grown. Not just names on a screen, but streets and buildings where people had learned to ask, what happens to us if we win this way? My first stop was Pasadena. The city spread under a clear sky at the edge of mountains. Old test stands for rockets had become quiet. Monuments, new labs focused on safer reactors, climate control, and deep space habitats. In a lecture hall, I watched young engineers work through failure scenarios. They talked about bridges, fusion plants, and jump drives. But one teacher also showed them old war graphs, just as Mara had shown me. "See this curve," the teacher said, hand on a rising line. "Systems under stress grow fast. That is not always good. Your job is not just to make things work. Your job is to ask what kind of people we become if this system spreads." Students took notes, not with excitement, but with sober attention. I saw in their faces a kind of quiet pride, not in power but in carefulness. From there, I went to Washington, D.C. The city's old buildings stood near newer ones, all facing a wide river that had once been more polluted than it was now. I walked through a hall lined with archives of laws passed during war and later rolled back. Screens showed votes where emergency powers had been limited. Even when fear was high, in a training room for oversight officers, humans practiced saying no to powerful people. They rehearsed how to demand data, how to insist on pauses, how to bring in outside reviewers. In one simulation, a leader tried to push through a fast strike. The oversight trainee replied, "Voice steady. Red category rules require independent review before any such action. We will not sign without that." They treated that refusal not as defiance, but as duty. My last visit was to El Paso. The city lay in a dry region, straddling a human border that had once been a sharp dividing line between nations. Now it was a shared zone, busy with trade, work, and memories. I visited a training center for peace officers and small unit leaders. On a warm afternoon, under a bright sky, recruits in light armor moved through drills. Some involved high-pressure confrontations with actors playing angry civilians. Others involved building entry in dangerous conditions. Each drill ended the same way. The instructor would gather the group and ask a simple question. Where was your first chance to slow this down? Recruits talked about their own rush of fear, about the moment they had wanted to shout or use force, and about the choice to instead call for backup, move to a safer angle, or buy time with words. In a quiet courtyard nearby, a long wall carried the names of people who had died in old border violence. No speeches played, no flags waved. People came and stood for a moment, then left. Some touched the names, some did not. The space was not about glory. It was about cost. On my last day on Earth, I returned to the El Paso Center to watch one more class. A group of young recruits stood in a circle around an instructor. Some wore military gray, some civilian blue, some medical white. They came from farms, cities, orbital stations. Some would serve on Earth. Some would serve far away. The instructor held up a small device that projected a simple red square in the air. This is our symbol for red category, they said. Most of you will never have to call it. That is our hope. But if you do remember what it means, it does not mean panic. It does not mean hit harder. It means slow. Add eyes, add rules. Measure yourself before you act. They went around the circle. Each recruit, in turn, had to say out loud what they would do first if they felt the urge to attack fast. Check my orders, said one. Call my partner to confirm what I saw, said another. Ask for a time check and breathe, said a third. Look for civilians, then decide, said a fourth. None of them said, strike. Strike not first. As I watched, I thought of Lyre Spire and its unchanging light. I thought of the corridor and the armed ships drifting, engines cut, but lives intact. I thought of Haesvar's wish for a sharp human line at the border, and of Mara's steady refusal. The galaxy did not become safe because humans held back. There were still conflicts, still raids, still hungry factions watching weak worlds. But perhaps I thought the galaxy had gained something better than a new weapon. It had gained a species that had looked at its own capacity for war and decided to build a culture around holding that power under control. When I left Earth, I carried with me not just notes and recordings, but the sound of recruits learning to pause. In my final written line to the Council Archive, I did not call humans peaceful. I called them dangerous and wise enough to know it. And I wrote that the greatest gift they could offer the rest of us was not their fire, but their brakes.